All right. Hey, everybody. Henry Melindy here. I have the pleasure of being together once again with Greg Doback. Greg is the owner of Standard.io, and I want to talk to you more about the topic of the conversation today is the FCC ruling and one-to-one opt-in, the changes in TCPA that are likely to come to pass in early February. This is an update. Many of you guys know, we live in the world of over here. My premium offer obviously is helping organizations move into the Ping Tree environment and kind of get away from having less elements of control and moving into the environment having more elements of control. There's one thing that is kind of staring us all, in the eyes here upcoming in the new year, and that is these changes to TCPA compliance. And I wanted to bring Greg in because Greg is, he's the guy the developer of the SITPAC protocol, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. Basically, what this is the ability to answer all of the questions and have solutions for TCPA compliance at scale and what that looks like. The audience that we're really speaking to here is really, lead buyers of all types, marketing companies, marketing agencies, media buyers, lead generators in general, because this affects all of us. And I want to take a minute. Greg, say hello. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Excited to jump into this. Like you said, own Standard Information. We're a ping post lead distribution platform. And we came out with the open source and free to use SITPAC protocol. That is to deal with all the one-to-one regulations that are coming into play in January and make sure everybody's prepared for that and continue buy, sell leads, as they were before. And so, we put a lot of work into it. I'm actually a lawyer myself, and so we've been diving deep on getting everything prepared for it because it is a big change.
Yeah, I mean, it's, your law background, your legal background definitely makes me feel better in this arena, because there's a lot of things that, I've had to really kind of study up on this and figure out, as everybody should, what this means. In general, for those that are not really, hyper aware of this, let's talk about the one-to-one and just in general, the changes that are coming to pass for sales organizations and lead generators of all different types. If you could break it down for us in layman's terms, Greg. Sure. What these changes are, how do you think it might potentially affect, the marketplace? And then eventually we'll talk about some of the solutions that, you guys as our technology partner has developed, to answer this at scale. But what is one-to-one? What's the main crux of the matter with TCPA?
Sure. So just kind of summing it up really quickly, because it is a fairly big topic, but at its core, TCPA regulation, which is the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, has governed who is allowed to reach out to consumers and what kind of permission you need to do that outreach. And so previously, it was basically prior written consent. You could gather that, but you could gather that on behalf of, it wasn't explicitly limited to a certain number of companies. You could just say, hey, our marketing partners. It could be, a group of companies, anything like that. What one-to-one has changed and what the kind of seismic shift in TCPA law here is that the FCC, which governs the TCPA, has stipulated that consent has to be given on a one-to-one basis, meaning that you have to explicitly name the company that you're reaching out for, and you have to get a single opt-in per company. So if you are Alpha Co. and you are buying leads, the website that's generating the leads needs to say, hey, I get consent to Alpha Co. And there needs to be a single click or a single action that does that. And so you can get multiple consents. So you can say, hey, Alpha Co. and Bravo Co., but there should be two check boxes. It needs to be one action to one consent. And so the days of being able to say like our marketing partners or a big list of people are gone. And so you need to explicitly spell out who it is that you're giving consent to. Otherwise, you're going to be in violation of TCPA.
Yeah, so current TCPA and the way that it is right now, for a lot of you guys that maybe you've done this, but you land on a landing page, maybe you're funnel hacking, you're entering in the information, you go down to the terms of service, and that's where you see the list of thousands of companies, and that currently is a solution to the current way TCPA is. Everything changes. in early 2025, where that one-to-one is explicitly stated as being needed, right? And so, so that kind of explains, it explains what it is in general, but when do we expect this to come into play? I know that this was kind of mandated. It was talked about at the beginning of the year, right? And so now we're talking about 2025. Is there an expectation or what?
It's a hard deadline. So, and it's already been challenged. The lawsuits that I've been following have not gained really any traction. And so I think there's a very low chance, like sub 5% chance, that this gets delayed or does not go into effect. And so it goes into effect at end of January 2025. So I think everybody should be prepared for that. I think that, thinking that a challenge might come up that delays this or, something like that is exceptionally unlikely at this point. The court systems move pretty slowly. So I think everybody needs to be prepared for that to be the law of the land, basically come the start of 2025.
Okay, awesome. So it's a reality, and so you can either bury your head in the sand or you can try to get with the times and understand what is coming to pass. So this is going to affect a lot of organizations in the way of like a lot of organizations, as you and I know, being in the Legion game. I mean, age data is a big thing, scraping data is a big thing, virtual door knocking is a big thing. Where we're scraping homeowner information and they're pushing it through robodials and pushing it through the CRM for SMS and email marketing, etc. I mean, conceivably, based on what we understand of TCPA compliance, those are going to be big no-nos, right, in 2025.
Yeah, this affects a lot of things. The lead generation industry is impacted as a whole. Real time, which is what a lot of people do. But yeah, like you said, age leads pretty much dead on arrival by this. So if it's an organization that you are trying to buy age leads, if you're trying to do virtual door knocking, or if you're just like prospecting by calling up random people, you're going to be pretty squarely in violation of this. And so that is going to be it's just a big risk factor. And so I think that's pretty squarely what the FCC was kind of going against. There's like, it's a pretty universally accepted fact and very popular for these anti-robocall, anti-scam call legislation. Whether or not this is really effective at combating that, because I think that a lot of folks do that illegally anyways today, is a topic for another conversation. But like, this legislation gets a lot of support, and so I think it's very unlikely to get overturned. And I think they're explicitly targeting that kind of action where the consumer is not immediately expecting a call. They put in their information a long time ago, or maybe they didn't put their information in at all, and they're getting calls, and that's what they're going after.
Yeah, which this is an environment for the professional litigators to come out with all of their guns blaring, right? Because this is a big boost to that type of business. Professional litigators are going to be keeping an eye on this. So you and I live in the ping post world, right? I mean, we do lead gen at scale, supplying many buyers, so. And you've been kind of like on the forefront of this for quite some time, and you've developed a standardized protocol, which is it's SITBAC is what I'm understanding, right? That's SIT dash and then BAC SITBAC, right? It's a protocol. How does that pertain to at scale relative to ping post? I've had passing conversations with individuals that had questioned whether or not ping post is going to continue to be viable. So I wanted to get your opinion on that.
Sure.
I think I know the answer to that, and you're going to educate us on that. But and then let's move into the SITBAC protocol, something that you've kind of developed as an open source, and how that works, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. So to your first point, is ping post going away? No. If anything, I think it's going to gain a lot of momentum after this, because people who were relying on aged leads, people who were relying on other methods of getting cheaper leads, that's just going to be flat out prohibited under this. You're not going to have the one-to-one consent. It's pretty much impossible to obtain. So moving forward, ping post and getting real-time leads, I think, are going to move up actually a few notches, and it's going to become more popular. I've heard that as well. Ping post is going away, and I think that kind of myth comes from the fact that as Ping Post operates today, you don't typically know who the end buyer is. If you're a lead generator, you might sell to marketplace, you might sell to Angie, and Angie sells onto like a contract or something like this. And so the lead generator might not know when they're generating the lead who that end person is. And so if you're kind of new to this space or you don't really fully understand like how it works, then you think, okay, that's a deal killer. There's no way they can get that the end buyer name back to populate on the website to get that one-to-one consent. But it really comes down to a technical problem, because that is what is at the end of the day required, is you have to get that end buyer name. The FCC calls it the seller, but we're going to keep calling it the end buyer, the person purchasing the lead, that service provider. You need to get their name onto the website. And so kind of brings the next point. That is what the sit-back protocol does, is it is a protocol that is free, open source. Anybody can take it and use it, develop it, put it into their own platform. We're not charging for it. The IP's out there. It is sit-backbac.com. You can check it out. But basically, it's a protocol for you to be able to transmit up while the person's filling out the form and you're doing the lead auction. It initiates the ping of the Ping Post earlier in the process. So that's actually happening before the form is filled out completely. It's going through, and the end buyers through this protocol can enter their name to be put onto the website. The lead distribution system is going to rank that based on the way they want to distribute that lead normally. And then that rank list is sent to the website, and the website will display the entities that you want to get one-to-one consent for when the lead is being generated. And so it solves this problem of being able to get that name onto the website, even if you're selling through multiple entities, because you can pass that. It's basically a ping URL that's generated up through the ping tree to your end buyers. And so it can go through multiple entities. You can go through an Angie. It can go through, whoever needs to do that. And so the website operator doesn't necessarily have to have that direct relationship with the end buyer. And it can still get that information back in time and put onto the website. And so really it's more of a technical hurdle than anything.
Yeah, no, that's really, I mean, and for those of us, maybe on the outside looking in, trying to understand this, I will go ahead and make a real quick plug that you had shot a really well done video showing this protocol in action inside of the system. SIO, we'll talk about SIO right now, because that is how it can be used like right now with your system. But if you make a comment or shoot me a DM, I could ensure to send that video over to you just so that you've got that. It's going to be really, really straightforward, but it brings all of this to life. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and do that. Moving on though, so this can be used now, right? Through the platform that you have, that SIO, right? So tell us more about that.
Yeah, so there's two ways you can use it, and it's fully developed. It's operational today, so this isn't in theory sort of thing. This is a practical, we have it applied to landing pages in use sort of tool. It's working, and so if you go to sitback.com, you have both the option you can use it on the standard information platform. So it's a lead distribution platform. It's baked in, it's built in. So if you get on that platform, then it's really, really simple to use. There's two scripts that you just add to your landing page. The scripts basically do all the work for you, and then you can sell leads like you normally were before. If you have your own lead distribution platform and you don't want to use standard information, then we have on the Sitback website instructions for how you can get that implemented on your own lead distribution site. Of course, you'd be self-hosting that. Everything's on your own page, so neither standard information nor any other entity would be involved in that or see any of that data. And so you can also do it that way. The idea being that, all these platforms need to work well together. Everybody has the common way of doing it. So we're not trying to monetize this. We just want to make sure that, come January, that everybody has something in place where buyers are protected and they can keep buying.
Tremendous. Okay, so that's awesome. The program that we have here in helping sales organizations move into this environment, it obviously, there's a learning curve to it, and our alpha, Ping Post program that we provide to organizations that qualify for that transition, et cetera, is kind of what we do. We do hang our hat on this system largely, not because we, of course, we have a great working relationship with Greg and have for some time, but this is the latest and greatest technology. This does have all the answers in place right now to go live way prior to any mandates or, effect dates at the beginning of the year. Last point. So how to move forward with FCC one-to-one just in general now, right? So like, when do we want to have it in place? All of those things. What does it prohibit? We talked about that. Any additional things that you want to add relative to the overall changes for the industry? I think that there's a lot of positives because less consumer pressure means, more consumer penetration, right? We're going to be able to reach these individuals because there's less consumer pressure, just in general. So could you expand a little bit more about that and like,
Yeah.
when do we need to actually have something in place and what is our quickest route to doing it?
I mean, realistically, you need to be having something in place today. Like, even though the deadline is January, you don't want, it takes a little while to get spun up. You have to get your vendors, you have to get your campaigns, ready to use this. If you're not already on a platform that supports, either sit back or has some strategy for one-to-one compliance, you want to get that done and ready. You don't want to be experimenting with this come January where you're, you might have to take down your whole operation to comply with this, or you get, you start getting hit with lawsuits right away, and then you're struggling to play catch up. Also, any lead that's generated after January, it's not every lead that was generated after January. It's a January cutoff. So even if your lead was generated in December, you have to stop working it come that deadline. If it's not one-to-one compliant, that is like the date where it comes into effect. And so calls made after that date, regardless of when it was generated, are going to be in violation of TCPA. And so I think that's the big thing to have in mind. Is like, really, the time's up. It's time to get into this and do this today.
That's a major point because if you run through November, and I mean in the solar industry, like we have some people pumping the brakes in November, some people want to hit it hard. They're generating leads through the traditional means. It's not one-to-one. November, December, come January, you can't touch those anymore. Like that's sunk money, so that's a big deal.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So, do you have the same opinion as far as the positive maybe changes as far as the industry goes? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I'm on the same page. To be honest, I think this is going to be a positive overall impact of change. It's definitely a headache now where there's a big technical change. It involves, everybody doing things a slightly different way. But at the end of the day, I think this is going to be positive for the industry. I think, people sometimes hesitate to fill out forms because they don't want to be harassed for months and months by different organizations. That data gets resold sometimes. Companies sometimes sell their leads as aged. All that just beats up the consumer, and it makes it harder for people who are doing it the right way, who are getting real-time leads, trying to fulfill that customer request in real time, or, right when they're doing it. It makes it harder for them to operate when you have consumers who are hesitant to put in their information. And so I think this will help clean up the industry. It will get rid of some bad actors. I'm actually pretty positive about this effect on the industry and what we can do with it. And I think it's going to make, everybody who's doing a good job more productive. I think they have to lean in on this. And then hopefully you have consumers who are happier. And then you have way more productive, more profitable sales organizations when they're not competing against people who are, just dialing out on old data.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big deal. I echo that same thing. I mean, honestly, whenever I saw it come to pass, I thought it's about time because, there's so much that goes on, with the age data, with the robo dials, the consumer pressure. Nobody wants to answer the phone these days. And it's because of that. My whole curiosity is we're in this world where we understand, we've seen it coming from a mile away, but the consumer, the general consumer, they don't necessarily pay attention to TCPA compliance, right? So they, come January, they don't know that anything's changed. It's going to be a little bit of time before they start to realize that things have changed, and maybe there will be some conversation around it. In some years, it'll land on, but in general, I think that it's just going to be a lot less pressure for the consumer. That's only going to help, sales organizations.
100%. But I think the people who are paying attention, the professional litigators, people who are filing TCPA suits, they're the ones who are paying attention to this. So you're right. I think the general consumer might not, they probably never even heard of TCPA to begin with. They're not going to really notice anything changing come January. But, the people who file these suits is, making their living, they're for sure going to be on top of this. And so I think that, you'll see a change in the marketing industry as people avoid those kinds of lawsuits.
Well, man, as a technology partner, to us and Solar Savings USA, and for what we do with the Alpha Pink Tree Mentorship and transitioning organizations into this realm, right? I want to thank you for all the work that you've done. I was excited to see it all come to pass because of the relationship that we have. And I knew you've been working on it for a long time, really confident in everything that you put together. But for the general public out there, maybe not a cautionary tale, but they need to vet and understand what their lead providers are doing, right, in order to solve this, because ultimately it can come back on them and they can get the brunt of it, right? So, you have any advice for organizations out there that are trying to, think of what do I need to do to make these changes? Maybe if they're not, what is it that they need to ask? What do they need to do in order to ensure that they're safe?
I mean, I think the big thing is you want to make sure you're working with reputable lead vendors. You're working with people who you trust. That's one of the reasons I like working with you and your guys' organization is that you guys do a great job finding good, lead vendors. People who are coming on the standard information platform. Their biggest question usually is how do I find good people, good lead vendors? And so, I love referring people over you guys, but just generally, people, it's becoming more dangerous because of this to buy leads, and you want to avoid those fly-by-night organizations, those no name websites that hey, we'll get you leads, we'll get you prospects. That's going to spell trouble, and it just becomes more dangerous. And so I think a guide, or at least doing your homework on who you buy leads from, is going to be important. I think that's the biggest takeaway from this, and I think that the companies that are going to be successful post January are going to be the ones that want to get with good lead vendors who not only have results and they're making profitable leads that are helping businesses grow, but we're also doing it the right way and using the right technology to get it done.
I mean, it's such a big deal, even with the fact that you said, as of January 1st, you're no longer able to, and we're already in August, you know what I mean? So any leads are being generated now cannot be touched in January. So those conversations need to be had right now with those lead providers. And I can tell you from personal experience, there are major lead providers inside of the solar vertical that, that everybody knows, not naming names, but, the ads are generic, they go to a generic lander, and then they end up with the buyer. I think that it's very important for these organizations to start having those conversations now. And I think a first step is really better understanding these changes that are coming to pass and know what questions to ask, and find out what those answers are and make your best decision at that point. But I'm glad we've got all this figured out way ahead of the game. For sure. Thank you again for that.
Of course. And just on that point, come January, companies can still run generic ads. They can do all of that, but they have to be naming the company. So they have to have some sort of protocol in place to be getting that in if you want to be compliant. And so that is, it's good to be on top of everybody's mind. We got to you got to get in and get going with this change. Like you said, come end of January, leads that you generated before are, no longer unless you have that one-to-one consent, you can't call them anymore. And so, if you want to be working those fall leads in the springtime when the snow melts and people are looking for solar again, you better make sure that they're compliant today.
Make the switch today. Okay, awesome. Well, Greg, we might follow up with more of this as it kind of gets closer and closer. I know that there's going to be a lot of questions. Again, if you guys have, if you're wanting to see that video that Greg has spun together so that you can see how the technology works, make a comment or shoot me a DM, and I'll make sure to get it over to you. Greg, we might have to double down and do a few more of these in the near future, but I appreciate your time, man, as always. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on here, Henry. Really appreciate it, and looking forward to the next one.
All right, sounds good. Talk soon, Greg.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.